Canberra-based think tank, the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, released a detailed report today into our defence sector, calling on the federal government to lift its spending. The report asks whether our defence force is strong enough to act as a deterrent from adversaries like China, which recently conducted live fire drills in the Tasman Sea. So, do we need to lift our spending? Joining me now is Steve Baxter, the founder of defence technology investment firm Beaten Zone Venture Partners. Steve, thanks for your time. I mean, how does Australia's spending on defence stack up against other nations?
G'day, Ed, and thanks for having me on. Look, Australia's spending on defence is measured against GDP, as many nations are. To put this in context, nations such as the US are about 3.5% of spending on defence versus GDP. Poland, for example, is approaching 5%. We are at 2% spending, so we are quite below par when it comes to that. And to your opening statement, it would be very hard for us to act as a deterrent to China in any respect. We've always fought alongside and had the cooperation of larger allies. World War II and pre-World War II, it was the UK or it was England, and World War II and post, it's been the US. So we have to be a good ally to assist in that deterrence, and to do that, we need to spend.
Obviously, we've got the AUKUS pact with some of our big allies, including the US, but is the big adversary on that regional threat front, is it coming from China? Are they the main one Australian Defence Force is probably worried about?
They're the only one they're worried about.
Well, you're an investor in defence technologies. I mean, how do we encourage more of the private sector as well to start investing money in our defence sector? Because it can't all just come from the public sector and the federal budget.
No, I agree, and I think the way you actually invest in the defence sector is to understand that the Australian defence market's exceptionally small. And we at Beaten Zone, we look at what we call the allied market, and the allied market is roughly 50 nations that we could sell defence goods to and not breach laws in Australia. So country we have defence cooperation with. That combined market in US dollar terms is $1.7 trillion and an average spend of 2% of GDP. Now, the Australian defence budget is $35 billion US dollars. Now, when you consider the rest of the world, NATO has just come out, Mark Rutte came out 2 weeks ago, head of NATO, and said they are heading towards 5% of GDP, as is the US. So that 1.7 trillion will grow to probably well over 3, and that's the market. So the opportunity here is not just Australia, but it's a growing allied market that is seeing a rising demand for the goods and services it needs to conduct its business.
And are there many defence technology companies in Australia? Are there many innovative businesses out there in the defence space that people can invest in?
There are. Looking at the top end, I suppose we have some listed companies which are great. You might look at Austal, you might look at Drone Shield, for example. In the unlisted space, and now government-owned, a Canberra-based naval radar business called CEA, which is a world-leading business. And in the smaller unlisted space, again in that private space, we have amazing businesses creating everything from electronic warfare solutions. We have amazing space capability, radar, sensors, training and targeting. We actually so hit above our weight when it comes to this. There's numerous opportunities out there.
And more broadly, are we an attractive place to invest? Like, does the government have the investment settings right at the moment?
I think Australia has some amazing schemes to attract investors into markets. We have, how you incentivise investors in it is you provide incentives, and that's done through taxation typically. So we have 2 schemes primarily: the ESIC, a Malcolm Turnbull scheme from 2016-17, and the ESVCLP scheme. These roughly give very good tax breaks to investors. However, when you consider that in March 2 years ago, the Defence Strategic Review was published, and it said 2 things I think it got correct. It named China, and then it said we're out of time. So in the context of being out of time, and that alluded to our strategic warning time being eroded, and we no longer have 10 years, we have a lot less to prepare. What do you do in that context? So we need to supersize incentives, I believe, for Australian private investors in this defence market. So instead of the 10 and 20% incentives, if we think this is a really strategic problem, we're out of time, let's make that 50 or 100% tax incentives. Because if we are out of time, we need to start acting.
Yeah, and as we see, geopolitical tensions really escalating and brewing around the world, are you noticing a pickup in interest in investing in Australia's defence sector?
Yeah, very much so. I would describe it, and I've been on the fundraising trail for 2 years at this point in time. I would describe it as the tarnish of investing in defence is slowly going off. So it's becoming a shinier thing that people care more about. Now, what's occurred in Ukraine in 22 and the Middle East since, and the recent circumnavigation of Australia by a Chinese flotilla has really brought the state of the world into real brightness. So look, the reality is that when the Cold War ended, we got a bit lazy, but now the holiday from history is over, and we've got to pick up our game. We really have to prove to our security guarantor, being the United States, that we're a good ally.
Steve Baxter from Beaten Zone Venture Partners, thanks for coming on the show.